children, and welcome back to Longbox of the Damned! It is always too long a wait before the season of fear comes and we are reunited. And yet, I have not been slumbering, for I now appear in special media like this. But I know why you're all here. You wish to hear tales of the unusual, the peculiar. Well, submitted for your approval, the Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone, where the only boundaries are that of imagination. And we have quite an imaginative little tale here for a Twilight Zone comic that is still relatively recent. Portrait of a man who has everything, but is set to lose everything, and thus decide to lose everything in order to save everything. Oh, that's the thing about the Twilight Zone. It can give you a headache if you think too hard about it. Trevor Richmond is, well, rich and powerful from the company he is an executive for. However, he has not exactly been all that moral in his activities, and the FBI are beginning an investigation. Sure, he could evade the law for a bit of time, but it's certain that he will be caught. And so he goes to his only option, a powerful business called Expedited Services Limited that will change his appearance, his records, his entire life, so that he can walk free and clear. And it seems to work at first, until he sees his old face walking around. He is a changed man, admitting his wrongdoings and all the embezzled monies, getting back together with his girlfriend, and basically taking steps to correct all the mistakes that Richmond had made. The original Trevor, however, is bitter that someone else is walking around with his name and face. He hates that someone is using what belonged to him. Like the jealous, overbearing husband who assumes his wife will be miserable without him, he is annoyed to find out it is not the case. What's more, with all the good publicity that the new man has created, he suspects that if he took back his life, he'd get off with a slap on the wrist. He confronts the man who took his life, a man who was just trying to make a good life for himself, until he had the worst day of his life. Inoperable bone marrow cancer guaranteed that he would live for only 3 more years. His girlfriend, unable to cope with the sorrow that came with it, left him. And then Expedited Services Limited came to him. They could not cure his cancer, but they could ensure he would have a comfortable life for the few years he had left. By switching his face! Unfortunately, the original Mr. Richmond does not care for his sad story and demands to have his old life back. Just how far will he go to take it back? And will he succeed against the new, improved Mr. Richmond? But even as one story ends, another begins, my children. This Twilight Zone series links its different stories together in small, intersecting ways. One road leads to another, and there's a signpost up ahead. However, that is a tale for another time. The season of fear begins again, my children, with its colors and its varying shades of grey. This is the season of imagination, of horror and suspense. This is the season of intrigue, and the opening signs of the season can be found in the Twilight Zone. Greetings, my children! It is the 3rd year that you have taken a glimpse into the Longbox, so it is only fitting that for this momentous time we spiral into the final tales of Uzumaki. We begin with the house. Kyrie's home has been destroyed from the hurricane at the end of the last volume, so many of the disaster victims have had to move into the old row houses, ones built centuries ago that are still around. The particular house they have moved into is said to be haunted, which is sort of true. The evidence certainly points to that when strange warts begin growing on their bodies, and on the peeping Tom neighbor who wants Kyrie. I am beginning to notice a pattern of people who really want Kyrie. I don't see the appeal personally. For one thing, she's got a pulse, and that's really kind of a turnoff. Next is butterflies. Nobody ever suspects the butterflies. Uzumaki! Terror in the tradition of the ring! Actually, the title is a metaphor. A great deal of time has passed since the previous chapter. Several more hurricanes have come, all of them sucked into the whirlpool at the center of town. Reporters have begun trying to investigate the strange occurrences in the place, but continually meet with disaster when attempting to enter the town. One reporter, Chie Maruyama, manages to get into the town, but it has been almost completely destroyed. Except all the row houses are still standing. All the rescue crews sent after the hurricanes, all the reporters, everyone who has come to Kurozucho is stuck there, unable to escape. And now the air pressure has become so twisted by the spiral that speaking loudly or moving yourself quickly will cause tornadoes to whip up. It's like a butterfly flapping its wings and creating a tornado thousands of miles away. And that brings us to chaos. Roving bands begin to learn how to ride the tornadoes for fun, destroying anything left that they can find. In one of the crowded row houses, an ancient map of Kurozucho is found. The town shaped like a spiral, and the writing too blurry and worn to read. Kirye's family leaves the row house after Shuichi is kicked out, and we learn that the tornado riders are surviving on the only meat left to eat: snail people. Well, it's understandable why they would eat them. After all, they're not even human anymore. Although really, what do you have for a side with giant snail? And as we continue this spiral down to the conclusion, there is erosion. People still come into the city as aid workers, not realizing that they cannot escape. Those who try to leave by the tunnels find it never-ending. Those who try to escape by boat or raft are sucked into the whirlpools surrounding the place. Some of the remaining people begin changing into snail people and hope to find respite in one of the row houses. But they are full. So full, in fact, that the people have become twisted into knots around each other, compressed and stretched like spaghetti. The twisting mass, desperate to create more space as the row house sides breach, begin constructing additions to the row houses, one normal person staying behind to assist the efforts. And upon realizing that her brother is transforming into a snail person, Kyrie vows to escape the town. And naturally, in the next chapter, Escape, she does not escape. Her attempt to leave via the mountains only finds the forest twisting back, time itself spiraling around, so that she is not certain how long she and her party have been walking. Unfortunately, she must let her brother go to keep him from being devoured by those obsessed with eating snail people. And when they return to the town, they find the row houses have been expanded into a complete spiral. Kyrie, Shoichi, and Chie try to get to the center of town in search of Kirie's parents, but soon lose Chie. And when the row houses finish the extensions, they empty out as if everything has been sucked into the center. And thus we reach the end. Completion. Kirie and Shuichi descend into Dragonfly Pond, which houses a great spiral staircase. Shuichi accidentally falls down the center, forcing Kirie to finally come down alone. She finds the population of the town frozen in stone in twisted shapes, including her poor parents, and Shuichi with his legs broken. He begs her to try to escape, but she concedes to stay with him. And thus both die, and the spiral curse is complete, signifying that it will begin again in the future when people come to the town once more. And thus we are left wondering just how the hell Kirie was narrating this all to us this entire time. There is a bonus story called Galaxies, though you can probably guess how that story goes on your own, considering the spiral curse. I admit, my children, this finale leaves a lot to be desired. After everything that Kirie has gone through, all the hardships, and all the struggle to fight against the spiral curse of Kurozu-cho, well, she just kind of gives up. I wouldn't even mind her giving up if she explained why she was giving up, but instead it's just, well, can't go on without you, Shuichi, so oh well. It is not a satisfying conclusion. But sometimes the destination is not as important as the journey, my children. And on this journey, we have witnessed terrors both subtle and gross, bodies twisting and nature twirling. Just be careful that on your own journeys, you do not also get caught in the spiral. Creepy greetings, my children! Yesterday, we ended a recurring series of these last few years, Uzumaki. But fortunately, today is another recurring series that won't be ending anytime soon. It is time once again for the finest in illustrated horror, Creepy. And right away, Creepy starts us off with a tale that can only be told in modern times. Do not click! But do click on my videos! Does Longbox of the Damned improve your skin and speaking ability? The answer may surprise you. Carolyn Stone is a teacher who has to deal with an obnoxious, spoiled little brat who keeps making lewd comments about his classmates, particularly the ones who seem to end up in the hospital more and more often. She overhears students talking about the Whistling Man, a chain letter email sent around that tells you not to click on it. If you do, it brings you to a site that shows pictures of the Whistling Man, a thin, tall man, all in black, with his face blurred out. Among the pictures will be of him standing on your block, and then one of him behind you. Whatever he does to you, it turns you into a vegetable, only able to sit and whistle to yourself. Will Miss Stone figure out how to evade the Whistling Man, while also evading a lawsuit from the lecherous rich father of her obnoxious student? Well, let's just say, some people should not be warned about what to click. Moving from one form of technology to another, we have Like Clockwork, where a clockmaker finds himself having problems finding romantic attachment. Dates stand him up. The dates he does have are too awkward, too emotional, too human. But fortunately, the tinkering little man has been busy making himself his own clockwork girlfriend. And once she's perfected, everything is great! For a time, anyway. They seem to be drifting apart. Perhaps she's rotting, perhaps she's too energetic, or perhaps he's too human. While Creepy has featured little one-page stories with the Creepy family, you and I, my children, have not seen them in such a long time, retelling H.P. Lovecraft's The Cats of Ulthar with members of the Creepy family. The story, if you are unfamiliar with it, is about the town where no man might kill a cat. But that was not always the case. For once there was a man and wife who delighted in trapping and killing the feline beasts. And one day, when a traveling boy lost his kitten who had been his only comfort, well, accusations aplenty, and dark curses can be placed on people who do not respect certain beasts on this world. And our final story is, I hate you, I hate you. No, really, that's the title. I don't hate you, my children. I love you. And you all love Dirmo Arte, don't you? It tells the story of the Curry family, who all apparently like to dress in the same striped clothes. Dial's father is abusive to him and his mother, but neither seems to understand why. At one point, he even tries to strangle the young boy, saying he is a murderer. The young Dial harbors resentment and hatred for the man, learning science and physics despite his father trying to prevent him from doing so, until finally his mother is killed by his negligent father, and he in turn kills his father with a bomb in his car. As Dale continues to study, he stumbles upon the secret of time travel and swears to go back in time and correct his unhappy past, only to realize that he has become his own hated father, and now he hates his younger self for killing his mother-wife. And the cycle goes on. Ooh, now that's creepy, my children, that you would get together with your own mother in the past to father yourself and then continue the cycle like an idiot. On the plus side, though, unlike some parents, at least he knows exactly what sort of a man his son will grow up to be. Greetings from Gotham, my children! The cape and costume crowd these days are so concerned with their multi-part comics that they rarely ever just have themselves a good old scary time with a single issue. But rarely is not the same as never. A group of drunk high school kids get together in a house to do what else? Play some spooky games. You know the kind. Bloody Mary, Candyman, Bend Round, you know that stuff. The fun, as they say, is in the setup, scaring yourself as you prepare to do something really stupid. And thus they perform the ritual to summon the Midnight Man. Talk and tick and tick and talk, the Midnight Man will stop the clock. The house is still, the walls are thin, the Midnight Man comes creeping in. At first, it appears the ritual didn't work, but sometime later, Batgirl is on patrol, and her EMF reader starts spiking like crazy. Why yes, of course the Bat family would carry ghost hunting equipment. They too are creatures of the night. Whiskey flowers on the floor, yellow chalk to make a door. Dawn is day and day is night, the Midnight Man puts out the light. She traces the signal to the house of the students, where the Midnight Man emerges from the chalk rectangle, its body a mass of black ichor and inky horror. Batgirl's narration throughout the story is what sells it. She talks of how she loved watching horror movies with Dick Grayson, loved the thrill of them. And then she speaks of how Batman taught her to fight all kinds of beasts, be they cowardly animals or foul spirits. Try to run and try to hide, the Midnight Man says open wide. It's just some fun, it's just a game. The Midnight Man will know your name. With the help of the teenagers, she crafts a plan to destroy the beast, speculating about its nature and questioning why this, of all nights, the Midnight Man would make an appearance. As for its nature, it seems to be a mimic, a shapeshifter that changes its looks depending on what it finds. And at one point, it even becomes spider-like. With the use of sage and fire, the beast is destroyed, as Batgirl reminds us of one of the most important tropes of horror movies, that it is not some masculine male macho hero who kills the monster, but the long-suffering girl. The Midnight Man retreats. She tells the kids that perhaps they should just stick to Mario Kart for fun. On the ending pages reveal a construction crew painting traffic lines that smell of booze and chalk in their paint mix. And it's forming a rectangle on the streets. The Midnight Man is a one-shot story about horror movie tropes and monstrous beings mixed with a superheroine dealing with her own issues in the ongoing drama of capes and cowls. And as such, it's really freaking fun! My children. Because this is the Longbox, we often forget that even video games can be a bit scary. So why not take some of these retro game characters and put them into comics? 8-Bit Zombie is essentially Wreck-It Ralph, except the main character is a zombie instead of Ralph. A bunch of 8-bit video game characters get together to celebrate how a villain called Zilla jumped from one game into another and became a hero. Everyone is congratulatory over it. But a poor zombie watches the festivities and realizes that he does not want to be a villain either. And so he decides to jump from one game into another, first traveling to a spy game. Unfortunately, his hunger gets the best of him, and he feasts on the brains of the second player character. Oopsie. And thus he comes back as a zombie, wanting to help the master zombie to become a hero as well. Unfortunately, his solution to this is to, eat more people and create more zombies. And soon the zombies are spreading across all the video game characters, invading game after game. Oh, the poor zombie. He just wanted to be a hero. And now all his friends are becoming undead, and thus cannot respawn. Every person he seeks out for help is consumed by the ravenous horde, leaving him to go to Zilla in the hopes that he can fix things. Zilla tries his best, but unfortunately, being a good guy now himself, he requires power-ups to destroy the zombie horde. The remaining characters quickly go to CEO Ken, who manages to hit the eject button on the game, stopping the horde. But leaving our characters in the darkness, where the zombie starts to get hungry again. But hey, Zombie may be a bad guy, but he's not a bad guy. 8-Bit Zombie is a little too short for its own good, but it's important to remember that the story does not end here. It is continued in the pages of 16-Bit Zombie, where no doubt blast processing comes into play. For the single issue though, it is a darkly humorous tale of the 8-Bit apocalypse. And like the best stories of zombies, be they video games or comics, it makes you feel real sympathy for the protagonist. Even if that protagonist is a decaying zombie who is really more a skeleton at this point. Also, for the ladies and of other certain persuasions, the zombie walks around without a shirt for most of the story. Just remember that the next time you are mowing down zombies in your video games, my children, they have feelings too. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. This is the comic, my children. Zombie Cop. When Halloween rolls around and horror needs to be shared with you all, that's where I come in. I carry a skull. Didn't get enough heroic zombies yesterday, my children? Well, don't you worry. Zombie Cop is here to clean up the streets and make it safe for those who do not consume the flesh of the living. In all seriousness, this comic is far better than it has any right to be. You'd expect something like Zombie Cop to be pretty much stupid trash, but it actually takes itself quite seriously and is very well written. This is the story of Monday, Joe Monday. A zombie plague has begun to spread inside of a city. People are aware of it, and the regular police are trying their best to contain it, but it is a losing battle. Joe has been infected by the plague, to the point where he is quite openly devouring people, but he is trying his best to carry on his work and not attack innocents. He manages to stave off his hunger by only eating violent criminals, of which there are considerably more of these days, thanks to looters and gangs in the wake of the zombie attacks. And it's a good thing for him too. The hunger is a persistent problem, and as the comic goes on, it gets increasingly difficult for him to resist the urge to simply attack anyone he encounters. His friend Al is doing his best to protect him, but keeps encouraging him to just let himself be shot so as not to put any innocents in danger. However, Joe has unfinished business to take care of. In the beginning days of the plague, Joe saved the life of a woman named Sally, whose husband was one of the first reported zombies. Joe swore to her that he would try to find what had turned her husband into the Walking Dead. Since her husband was one of the first victims, Joe suspects that he was close to whatever caused the plague. But the investigation grows increasingly difficult as his body weakens and decays, his mind succumbing more and more to the hunger. What's worse, Al is having a hard time covering for Joe, especially when normal citizens alert the police of his activities thanks to his squad car number. Zombie Cop is a dramatic story about an undead hero. It is the story of a man bravely resisting the tragic fight delivered unto him to bring justice and peace to his city. Even as the world falls apart, even as he falls apart, he is trying his damnedest to protect and serve. Will Joe resist the call of his hunger before he cracks the case? Will he devour those whom he cares for and loves? Will he splash the blood and entrails of his victims onto his golden police badge? The story you have just seen is fictional. The names were all made up because it is a story. But I'm sure they were changed to protect themselves from being sued anyway. My children! Well, we had 2 days in a row now where the undead are the heroes and we don't want them killing people. So let's read one where the undead is the villain. But we want to see him hacking away at anything that moves. Let's see if this story sounds familiar to you. A child suffering from a disease or birth defect is ridiculed at a summer camp. The counselors for the camp are supposed to be watching the kids, making sure they stay safe and stay within the rules. But instead, they're off having sex with each other. And then the kid gets tossed into some water. Now here's where the story goes a little differently. For you see, little David Faulkner is thrown in some water, but it's only 3 feet deep, so he's fine. The kids who bullied him, however, are not so lucky. Jason Voorhees is traveling through the local summer camp on his way someplace else. He eviscerates the children and the counselors, but when he spots Davy Faulkner, he sees something familiar in the boy and simply takes him along for the ride. However, Davy has other things to worry about than Jason. The local sheriff is a drug-abusing hick, and when two counselors run into him while fleeing Jason, he pulls his gun and, in his drug-addled state, accidentally kills the counselors. For some reason, Jason does not kill him, but proceeds on his way with Davy. The sheriff proceeds to mutilate the bodies of the counselors to claim it was Jason who did it, but he knows that little Davy saw him kill the two, and thus wants to find him and silence him before the FBI finds them. Davy narrates the story, telling us of the troubles of his life, how it's likely he will not live to see his 18th birthday thanks to his condition, of how he would have preferred to spend his summer playing video games and just relaxing, but his mother insisted he go to camp to make some friends, apparently not realizing how cruel some children could truly be. But good thing for him he did go, for in going to the camp, he has made a friend. Yes, living in the wilderness with Jason for several days turns out to be great for the kid. He's had excitement, not had to bathe or do what people told him to do, and he's learning from Jason how to kill things to defend himself, and make sure no one can hurt him ever again. However, the sheriff is closing in, the doped-up weirdo getting crazier and crazier as time goes on, hijacking a military helicopter to try to find Jason and Davy, and only caring about killing Davy even when there are more witnesses to his crimes. And all the while, the meth he's been taking keeps making him believe that spiders are crawling all over him. Well, he should enjoy the sensation for as long as he can, because when Jason gets to him, the only thing that will be on his skin are his own entrails.
How I Spent My Summer Vacation is a story of an unlikely friendship and the forces trying to drive that friendship apart. It's also about gutting anything that gets in your way. Cthulhu Fatan, my children! 2 years ago, we looked at a Lovecraft tale for the little ones, Howard Lovecraft on the Frozen Kingdom. Well, that was but the first of a few more stories. Would you care to hear how that story continues?
Since the end of the Frozen Kingdom, poor little Howard has been having bad dreams of a kingdom beneath the waves, and messages from his old pal Spot, also known as Cthulhu. It seems that the Frozen Kingdom has thawed, and now Spot has become King Cthulhu, but he has learned that the former evil king, Abdul, has found himself a dark ally, and plots to retake his kingdom and destroy anyone who gets in the way. For that, he needs the Necronomicon, still in Howard's possession. Spot warns Howard not to let the book fall into anyone else's hands, but it seems Howard's family has been taken prisoner by Abdul and his henchman Dethul. With Spot's help, Howard escapes the grasp of his enemies, but Spot is taken prisoner and his house transported away. Fortunately, he finds himself a friend in Constable Smith, aka Smithy. Smithy, it seems, has had his own adventures involving the Outer Gods and their shenanigans, and decides to join forces with Howard. He is in turn followed by his black cat Beastie, and an array of firearms and weapons. However, things are not entirely looking up for poor Howard. Abdul's ally has begun transforming him and his family into fish people, a condition which may become permanent if they do not do something soon. They retrieve Howard's insane father from the institution and transport themselves to the lethal world of Yuggoth, protected by limited magics from the poisonous environment. Of course, it cannot protect them from the creatures that inhabit such a place, who may be inclined to pick up Howard for a snack. And hey, it may drop him into water where he does not know how to swim, but he has nothing to worry about. The fall will likely kill him first. Oh, but I kid. They make their way to King Abdul, and Howard learns the name of his true enemy,
Almighty Azathoth, King of the Outer Gods, and Father of the Great Old Ones.
And really, that's just a fancy way of saying he's really old and his children never come around to visit.
With the help of his father and Smithy, Howard is able to free his family from the Fish People curse and even tricks Abdul into believing he got the Necronomicon. The group bids a hasty retreat from the Undersea Kingdom via Howard's house, but it seems that Spot could really use a GPS, seeing as they end up in what appears to be Egypt, but with a sphinx resembling his Cthulhu head.
Howard Lovecraft on the Undersea Kingdom continues the tradition of a child's introduction to Lovecraft. Give it as a gift for the kiddies. Just like I've given it as a gift to you, my children! They're coming to get you, my children! The original Night of the Living Dead told us quite a bit about the characters trapped in the house surrounded by zombies. But one story remains untold. Until now.
Night of the Living Dead, Just a Girl, tells us the tale of young little Karen Cooper, who spent all of the movie resting in the basement, slowly succumbing to a zombie bite on her arm. She has had herself a very difficult life, my children. And such a life is not improved by the people upstairs shouting and arguing with one another. But perhaps we should start at the beginning, where her real mother died of pneumonia and she had to be put up for adoption. Where all the other children teased and mocked her for being too old for anyone to adopt. Until she finally was found by the Cooper family, letting her start a new life. Or so she thought. While her adoptive mother was supportive and loving, she was not able to contend with her father, who it turns out was always a cruel asshole. The situation in the house had not driven him to that state. Her mother wanted a daughter. Her father wanted help at the dry cleaning store. And it seemed she could do nothing right at the business. Every mistake was always her fault. She did something wrong on a job, she distracted him, she took too long. But she was just a girl, so how could it be her fault? And her mother was no help, never speaking up in her defense, never attempting to protect her from his furious outbursts. Until finally they went on a car trip to a new town, hoping Mr. Cooper could get a job at a clothing factory and a new life would begin for them. But they were running late because she couldn't find her beloved doll. And then the living dead attacked. I'm sure in Cooper's mind she's somehow responsible for these too. Of course, just to really show what kind of an asshole Cooper was, he was ready to abandon her when she got attacked, but her mother went and got her, and they retreated to the basement. And finally, Karen remembered it all. With crystal clarity, she remembered all of the pain, all of the suffering her adoptive parents had caused, either abuse or neglect. And finally she decided to rip from Cooper's body what he had stolen from her. Her soul! Night of the Living Dead, Just a Girl has interesting ideas and not so interesting ideas. I personally prefer to believe that Mr. Cooper was driven to his asshole behavior by the situation, showing once and for all his true colors. However, we must also consider that the zombie plague was affecting the girl's mind too. After all, the artwork doesn't seem to reflect things entirely accurately when it comes to people's appearances. Perhaps this is a different perspective on how the zombies operate. They do not eat the flesh of the living out of hunger, but rather their craving is just to reclaim some semblance of humanity.
They're coming to get you, my children! But maybe it's not for the reasons you think. Fire bad, my children! But what isn't bad is a monster of some fame or infamy.
This is the monster of Frankenstein. In the 1970s, Marvel Comics was appreciating growth and popularity in its range of monster titles. You had your Tomb of Dracula, your Tales of the Zombie, and now we have our monster of Frankenstein. In the Arctic regions of the North in 1898, an explorer named Robert Walton IV, a descendant of the man from the novel, ventures into the icy tundra in the name of science to claim something very important. A body! Unfortunately, he is several years early to pick up Captain America, so he settles for Frankenstein's monster instead. The crew he hired to assist him thinks that the monster is cursed and will lead to their downfall. Not helped when a snowstorm claims a few of their lives. A young man inquires about the monster frozen in ice, and so he decides to tell him the tale. Basically retelling the story of the novel in all its comic adaptation goodness. It tells of Victor Frankenstein's obsession with creating life and building himself a monster. He rejected his creation out of mistrust, and the monster sought vengeance over time, killing Frankenstein's family one by one. The story is told at the same time as events unfolding on board the ship, of a storm that threatens all their lives aboard the ship, of the warmth of the captain's cabin freeing the monster from the ice, and the mutinous crew determined to rid themselves of the creature. Of course, some elements of the story concerning the monster are different than they were in the novel. For one thing, the monster does battle with and eats a grizzly bear. Then again, the monster is the one telling this part of the story, so he may have embellished things a little. Subsequently, you ever hear about the time I defeated a chupacabra in battle with nothing more than a hair curler and an ear of corn? After the ship is destroyed by an iceberg, Walton, his Eskimo companion Canute, and the young man join the monster in the wreckage, surviving with a fire in the ship's remains as they continue to tell the tale of the monster's bride destroyed by Frankenstein, the monster's desire for revenge against the scientist, bringing him to kill Elizabeth, Frankenstein's own bride. He chased the monster into the frozen north, where he was found by the elder Robert Walton. And the story makes another turn, as the elder Walton attempts to get Frankenstein's own vengeance, but fails. The monster retreats to the ice, wishing to commit suicide instead of letting others kill him, until his own hunger overpowers him and he seeks food, instead encountering a tribe of strange humanoid primitives who also appear disfigured. They became friends and allies, until they were all slaughtered by a rival tribe. He took his revenge once more before he found himself imprisoned in the ice, entombed by it, until he was found by the more recent Robert Walton. Sadly, the storm soon claims the lives of the three men whom Frankenstein slowly began to call his friends. But before Walton dies, he tells the monster that a descendant of Victor Frankenstein still lives, and perhaps he can help the monster now. But that is another story, my children. The monster of Frankenstein certainly lives up to the title, but in the end, he was also still a man. After all, don't we all have a little monster inside of us? Order! Order! Court is now in session, my children! Beware the creatures of the night! They have lawyers! Behold the best attorneys the dead can buy. Wolf and bird, counselors of the macabre. Did you accidentally wish your dead dog back to life with a wish-granting monkey's paw that you thought was a back-scratcher? Are you now inundated with lawsuits from people whose homes were damaged by the dog running amok? Is your house haunted but only on a full moon? Are you a plant creature that has been continually harassed by both the police and gardeners? Well, look no further for help. Who you gonna call? Not the Ghostbusters. You don't call the firemen when you want to sue somebody. No, you call Wolf and Bird, lawyers experienced in all things supernatural.
Because really, when you get right down to it, werewolves and vampires and ghouls and goblins, they're not scary. Lawyers, on the other hand, they're downright spooky.
Perhaps you need more proof of these attorneys' talents. How about the time they took on Haungen's toys and novelties? The owner had used a voodoo doll to turn his workers into zombie slaves. Well, I say slaves. After all, he was still paying them. But the thing is that even the dead have rights, and they wanted fair treatment. Lifetime contracts for their undead existence, minimum wage, all of that fun stuff. So naturally, when he refused, the zombies went on strike.
Zombies of the world, unite! You have nothing to lose but your voodoo dolls.
Of course, some of these stories reflect reality more than others. Like, for instance, the story of the horror host known as the Beermeister, who long ago in the 50s had to stop telling terrifying tales on television because some guy wrote a book who said that horror was destroying the youth of today and encouraging children to become criminals or the like. The horror hosts of the time had to abandon their craft. But of course, sometimes old ghosts regret their pasts, and sometimes the past repeats itself.
As a horror host myself, you can understand why I get a chill in my spine when I think about such possibilities. My children, I'm here to make your lives better with both a smile and a hacksaw.
Although perhaps you have a much larger issue at hand, like being the original Dracula, and your bones are on display in a sideshow museum. But there are other imitators out there who claim to be the original Dracula, and naturally, when you are restored to life, you're quite put off by having others use your good name to sell their second-rate show. Well, then it sounds to me like you need a good lawyer. One of the great things about this comic is that it's not just there for a done-in-one gag. Oh sure, there are puns aplenty, but the stories have ongoing continuity. Like Sod, the plant monster, who goes from just wanting to be returned to normal to embracing the added celebrity fame that comes with his condition. Or even Mr. Wolf, who has some luck with romance with a model who had been hinted at in various stories. Done-in-ones and ongoing storyline? You don't see that much these days, my children.
Tales of supernatural law proves that sometimes conflicts don't have to be resolved with bloodshed and gore. Though it's usually more fun when it does. From one haunted website to another, I bid you greetings, my children. Do you have a desire for revenge? Is there someone who has mistreated you? Is there someone who deserves eternal damnation? Well, perhaps you should contact the Hell Girl.
To seek revenge is to dig two graves, one for the original perpetrator and one for the person seeking revenge. And when you need revenge, there is no one better qualified than Hell Girl. Just go to her website at midnight, it's the only way to see it of course, and type in the name of the person you want revenge against. Let's say you're opening up a business for yourself, a little bakery, but your former teacher is jealous of your talent and recipes and steals all the press and acclaim for himself while spreading rumors about your bakery. It was your dream to have this bakery, and now he is destroying you. Such callousness, such uncaring, deceitful, selfish, evil acts deserve nothing less than the pit of hell, my children. And that's where Hell Girl comes in. Once your request is signed in, she will take care of the perpetrator, show him death and damnation. But of course, there is always a price. The price for your revenge? Your own soul! Oh sure, you will lead a long, happy life until the day you die. But when you do, it is hell that awaits you. Some might say this is a bit unfair, especially when you consider people like a child-molesting teacher who most assuredly deserves the terrible fate, especially when they try to make the victims of such assaults out to be the real perverts.
And really, being a frequent visitor of hell myself, I can assure you there is a special place reserved for that kind of inhumanity.
But bear in mind, knowing that the afterlife is there, that there is a cosmic balancing act of heaven and hell, they would most certainly already be on their way to that damned state. So perhaps you shouldn't be quite so impatient with your revenge. But still, there is such a thing as suffering nobly, if only to know with absolute certainty that someone else is suffering a far worse fate for their misdeeds. And that is the first volume of Hell Girl, telling 5 stories about evil people of varying crimes, who all ultimately get what they deserve. And perhaps 5 people who must live knowing that they will not necessarily be getting what they deserve. But in the end, it really doesn't matter who deserves what, only that a choice is made, a desire expressed, and the Hell Girl comes to bring you to your fate.
Hell Girl Volume 1 sets up the basic premise of these anthology scenarios. Just remember, my children, sometimes living well is the best revenge. Except for me, of course. I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Muerte, my children. Don't you know that by now? Last year we talked about a story where Batman became a true creature of the night. A vampire! So, what happened after that,
Batman was successful in defeating Dracula, but at the cost of his home. And his humanity. He is a vampire now, immune to the paltry bullets of ordinary criminals, and of the physics of regular men given his Stretch Armstrong limbs here. But it seems the vampire threat is not yet over. At least one nest of vampires survived the purging of the undead from Gotham, and they are still preying on its citizens. By Batman's detective work, there seem to be 3 distinct predators attacking the people. But it is not those predators that Batman should fear. The Joker is back in town, and he has plans for the Children of the Night and the music they make. Ah, yes, we did forget about the monsters Gotham City already possessed before the bloodsuckers got to town, didn't we? As we said before, vampires and monsters are real. But thank God not all of them are evil. For now, anyway. The late Tanya, who helped transform Batman into a vampire, left behind a serum that would sate his bloodlust. However, the serum is beginning to lose its potency, and the thirst is beginning to consume the Dark Knight. Well, that just makes things more difficult, doesn't it? Especially when the Joker has his right-hand man, Mr. Creech, increase the violence of the vampire attacks, converting as many as they can, instead of just leaving them to be staked by Batman. An army of the undead arises as their targets get more and more high profile, from street rats to crime bosses. But don't think they aren't still stalking people on the streets. Mr. Creech finds a woman named Selina Kyle and decides to pursue her, playing with his food by turning into a wolf and biting her that way. She escapes, but all of her pet cats lick at her bite wounds. And when she awakens, she becomes a literal Catwoman. She is something else, for it is not sunlight that burns her, but moonlight. with both her help and the daytime activities of James Gordon, who has organized a team of officers he can trust to strike the vampires as they sleep in daylight. Batman brings the fight to the Joker, eliminating the last of his gang. Unfortunately, in the battle, Selina is killed by the Joker, and Batman's last tenuous grip on humanity is severed. He snaps the Joker's neck and drinks his blood, finally damning his own soul. And so he instructs Gordon and Alfred to have one final victim for the stake: himself!
Batman Bloodstorm builds on what has come before with the vampiric Batman, asking the question again: can a vampire still be good? Well, you'll have to decide for yourselves. I'm on a highway to hell, my children! Well, to be accurate, today we're on a highway to horror. Route 666!
This is the story of Cassandra Starkweather, a very special girl. As the old movie quote goes, she can see dead people. However, as of late, she has begun to see more than just that. When one of her friends is accidentally killed, the ghost of said friend shows up to warn her of some dangerous things going down in the afterlife. Well, at least until her ghostly friend is dragged back to the hellish realm perdition by two shadowy ghosts. Because of her strange behavior and belief that these are all just psychotic episodes, Cassandra has her family commit her to a mental hospital. But she is immediately turned off by the head of the institute, Dr. Melchior. And she is right to be afraid of him. After a ghostly visit from her dead grandfather, Cassandra learns more about the battle and how she has a special power to see the spectral beings around her. The ghostly beings have no power on Earth, so they need agents to act on their behalf. Vampires, werewolves, all those fun beasts. They're well organized too. Even when they transform in front of people and are killed, their bodies revert to a human state, so anyone who investigates does not know how monstrous they truly are. Cassandra apparently has more powers than just being able to see things. She is apparently one of the special ones who can fight and kill the otherworldly threats. Well, assuming she can survive long enough to learn more. Naturally, there's a nationwide manhunt on for her, led by the all-too-human son of Melchior, who thinks she's just some crazed lunatic murdering everyone around her. But the true menace might be someone she befriends while traveling on a rail car, a serial killer known as the Rail Splitter, who sadistically murders hobos. He believes he has been sent to aid Cassandra's mission, since she lacks the will and skill to murder such powerful evil beings. But one must remember that not all monsters need to wear a human mask in order to show what inhuman beings they are.
Route 666, Highway to Horror, sets up the situation for poor Cassandra. Will she succeed in encountering her devilish adversary? Well, that's a different stop on this highway. Screaming greetings to you, my children! Some suspenseful films from the black and white era never got made into franchises, even though they certainly deserved it. One of these films? The Tingler.
The Tingler features Vincent Price as a scientist studying human fear, theorizing that there was a creature in the human body, a parasite that fed on your fear in the back of your spine. He called this creature a Tingler, and the more frightened you became, the larger it became. However, humanity can fight off its growth by screaming, shrieking in terror. The scream injured and killed the creature. Vincent Price was able to catch one of the beasts, before it is let loose in a movie theater, perhaps your own. Well, that was the thing. Movie producer William Castle created a gimmick for the movie by attaching buzzers to seats and having actors planted in audiences to faint. And then Vincent Price commanded you to scream for your lives! It was the only way to stop the Tingler. But enough about movies, let's talk about the comic. It is a sequel to the movie, appropriately titled The Tinglers. It is even considered a spin-off of the Vincent Price Presents comics made by Blue Water. You remember those, right? We looked at one 2 years ago. As if peering into a snowy vision. Anyway, Vincent Price's Dr. Warren Chapin is traveling into an African jungle in search of a tribe that supposedly worships fear. Along with him is his lab assistant Dive, Dive's wife Lucy, and their jungle guide Huxley. As they venture into the forest, Dive is killed by a panther, and a Tingler almost grows too large on Lucy's back due to her hyperventilating. The tribe then finds them and brings them back to their village. We also learn that not all is well with the good Dr. Chapin. In the film, Chapin attempted to induce a state of fear within himself to better study the Tingler by taking LSD. It seems, though, that one hit of the drug was not enough for him, for he is now quite addicted.
Ah yes, the true message of the Tingler. Just say no to drugs when you are experimenting with human fear. The rest of the time, it's perfectly okay.
Huxley tries to make a getaway on his own, but sadly he does not get very far. Just to the monument the natives have made to the Tingler. It is then that they notice that the people of the tribe all have scars on their backs. The Tingler has been removed from all of them. And what happened to the Tinglers? They were all cast into a pit, where they soon sent poor Huxley. Plus, some Tinglers are larger than others. And for our remaining heroes, they also make a break for it through the pit of the Tinglers, in total darkness. But their only hope is to scream! Scream!
Well, they can scream if they like. Me personally, I think that laughter is the best medicine. I bid you welcome, my children. It is time for us to once again enter a world of never-ending nightmares with Dracula himself, Bela Lugosi.
We begin with the evil eye, but it's hard to call it evil in this case, for it comes from a sad, lonely little girl who has a third eye on her head. Two bullies tell a nerdy kid to pretend to be her friend just to screw with her, but the two legitimately become friends. Until the bullies frighten him into revealing the third eye. However, he should have remembered her warning about the eye, how once she looked out of it at her cat in the wrong way, and how he got sick and never got better. We move from a sad child to very angry adults in Four-Way Split. An archaeological expedition is on an island, a forsaken jungle hell full of tribesmen and ape-men who keep trying to impede their progress. They're running low on food and supplies, beginning to turn on each other in anger, until they finally find the lost city they had been searching for, with all its treasures inside. But of course, it is guarded by long-necked lizards with a taste for flesh. How fortunate, then, that the archaeologist knows just how to keep the beasties preoccupied while he goes for the treasure. After a Lugosi legend and lore that tells us about the Lord of Nightmares, we proceed to the monster. Young Howard Stein believes himself to be the great-grandson of Dr. Frankenstein, to the point where he has his own laboratory where he's working to create a monster out of organs from dead bodies that he takes from the cemetery where his father works. However, he is bullied by the other children for being a nerdy, weird kid. But they'll all see, won't they? They'll all see what sort of monster he and they have created. Our final tale is, Bella's bedtime stories. Okay? Well, first he tells a brief half-a-page story about what happens when some hungry group of survivors start running out of food and tempers flare. But the real story is Prince Vlad's banquet. Prince Vlad was having himself a banquet in celebration of peace when one of the servants tripped and dropped the royal wine. And then people started to laugh. But unlike my laughter, such laughter was so disrespectful. A lesson would have to be learned from this. Otherwise, or perhaps because, heads will roll.
Bela Lugosi's Tales from the Grave never ceases to offer macabre entertainment, as offered by one of the greatest horror icons. Hey, maybe someday there will be Moarte's Tales from the Longbox! Ghoulish greetings, my children! Ah, yes, you see, I am this noble type of creature, the ghoul, an undead being. But, the ghoul for today is something a bit bigger than me.
The ghoul is a giant, almost 10 feet tall and strong as a Frankenstein monster. He works for the government on supernatural affairs and is on loan to Lieutenant Detective Klimt, who has summoned the ghoul for help. He is investigating a case in Hollywood about an actress from a long line of actresses. Except, as Klimt has examined the photographs of these actresses, they all bear a very close resemblance to one another. Almost like they're the same person. But how can that be? The elder actress has been in photographs with her daughter before. And yet no three in the family are together, since the last generation dies within a year of the appearance of the next. The ghoul is happy to help, but first he needs some help from Klimt and his little pea-shooter of a gun. It seems this is Walpurgis Nacht, the night of the devil, his demons, and all things evil walking the earth. A portal will be opening up at Griffith Observatory, and the ghoul would appreciate some help from Klimt dispatching the demonic forces. They can also interview some of the demons to see if anyone knows anything about the actress's longevity. Along the way, they also meet the good Doc Macabre, who uses his advanced Ghostbusters technology to slice a hole in an ectoplasmic force field that spews hell's blood when cut. And for such a job, he uses an ectoplasmic chainsaw.
Patent pending.
Interviewing some demons who are feeling talkative and don't want their heads blown off, they follow the trail to an undead private detective who has also heard of the actress and knows well enough to stay away, because whatever dark magics she is playing with, they make the devil shiver in his hooves. And so finally they confront the actress directly, as she is in the process of giving birth to herself.
Oh, well, surely she needs a baby shower then.
And after learning of how many murders she's had to commit in order to keep herself alive for centuries, using the blood of many men for the task, the ghoul and Klimt are finally able to end her acting career once and for all. The two leave as friends, but after viewing so much of the supernatural, Klimt will never be the same again. There is also a prose story about the ghoul, but we're here for the comics.
The Ghoul is a fun little story about a normal man crawling deeper and deeper into a hellish realm that he didn't believe in before.
while partnered up with a giant ghoul of a man. My children, dead or alive, take your vitamins, and maybe you'll grow up as big and strong as he is. Chimichangas for everyone, my children! There are members of the cape and costume crowd that I really do enjoy. The Spectre, Ghost Rider, and of course, Deadpool! Because everybody loves Deadpool! I especially like it though, when he goes up against someone else whom I admire. Deadpool, Dracula's Gauntlet is a reprint of a Deadpool story simply called The Gauntlet. Dracula hires Deadpool to deliver his fiancée to him, Shikla, Queen of the Undead. She has been encased in a coffin for millions of years, ever since vampires overthrew her kingdom from before the time of man. She was hidden away in a coffin to keep her safe from the war, but it is now her destiny to unite the underworld by marrying the vampire king. However, Dracula has his own designs, mostly just to take control of the entire underworld through the marriage. Unfortunately for him, he learns that Shikla's brothers still live, meaning they will inherit the lands and not Shikla. But then Deadpool has other problems on his hands. Blade the Vampire Hunter intends to keep the marriage from happening by killing Shikla, wanting to keep the underworld divided and in warring factions. Deadpool takes Shikla on a journey through Europe on their way to Dracula, showing her the glories of modern technology and culture, like cell phones and how you can take pictures of your genitals with them. But of course, we also learn much about Shikla herself. Like Deadpool, she is effectively immortal, ageless and forever young. Looking at skulls that line catacombs in Paris, the indicator of death, reminds her so much of life. And watching mortals as they age and die, it can be very disheartening to see so much death around you. Although not for me, all of my best friends are dead. Huey, Dewey, Louie, and our newcomer this year, Larry! Deadpool and Shikla fall in love with one another, so that just makes things even more complicated. Dracula, sick of how long it is taking to get his bride, kills Shikla's brothers and sends out other monsters and vampires to find Deadpool and his wayward fiancée. And so the war is in full bloom, with Dracula's vampires versus Shikla's monsters. And at the end of such a monster mash, there is the wedding of Deadpool and Shikla, who are still married today! You could say I am dating myself because of that reference, but I say I am dating myself because I am not very attractive to women. Deadpool Dracula's Gauntlet is hilarious and monstrous, and I cannot recommend it enough, my children. And when it comes to something as funny as this, there really is only one reaction you can give. Giant greetings, my children! It has been far too long since we have heard another tale about giant robots and giant monsters fighting. So let me tell you, today we are cancelling the Monsterpocalypse. Unlike Kill All Monsters, which did take place after the apocalypse, Monsterpocalypse sets us more in line with a Pacific Rim-like world, where there are elite teams piloting giant robots to combat emerging monsters. Our story begins with a team recently reassigned from their famous leader, Captain Kide, and the robot Defender X. To their dismay, they must now pilot a less advanced model, Sky Sentinel, with a new commander named Major Chase, who has never led a team in a giant robot before. Fortunately, he knows how to deal with problems, as they are quickly forced to come into battle with the tentacle-mouthed Yasheth.
But poor Yashet was not anticipating rocket-powered fists. While the battle goes well, there are some decisions considered questionable by the team for their new commander, but they have little time to worry about that since a new giant humanoid being has been spotted in multiple places. Whatever these beings are, friend or foe, Sky Sentinel is being sent in to retrieve one of them, alive for study. We learn the sad history of Major Chase, who once tried to rescue a convoy under fire in Guyana against orders, only for it to be a trap that almost got his team killed. Or was it? The Major reveals to his team that the convoy was not under attack by enemy soldiers, but the soldiers were actually defending the town from what was in the convoy, a baby monster called a Raptix. It was hushed up because the existence of monsters was not well known at that point. The team goes to capture the biomorph, as they are called, but it seems they are smarter than the average monsters. They can read the radio transmissions with the headquarters of the robots, learn that they are to be captured, and easily teleport away. Sky Sentinel takes heavy damage in its fight, but manages to get back to base, only to learn the Defender X is in danger of being destroyed by a monster called Gorgadra. If Defender X, the greatest robot, is destroyed in battle, the people will lose hope. Well, fortunately, it's the cavalry to the rescue. It is a glorious battle, my children. And unfortunately, the comic is left on a cliffhanger. But as I have said before, it is the journey that matters, of course. The comic is based on a collectible miniatures game of the same name. Now, I have never played the game, mostly because I spend most of my time throughout the year sleeping until the next October or DVD rolls around, but if the game is half as fun as this comic, I've got to try it sometime.
Monsterpocalypse continues to prove the old idea that the giant monsters fighting giant robots is fun and glorious. Here's hoping that someday we can see the fight again. Do you hear them, my children? The children of the night. What music they make. But we are here to make music of our own, as we tell the tales, the chronicles of Dracula. The Dracula Chronicles proclaim to tell the true story of Vlad the Impaler. It is even told by the many centuries old Dracula himself. And really, what could be more true than hearing it from the vampire's own lips? The early days of Dracula spell out the political situation for him growing up in Transylvania, and his father, the Lord Dracul, who ruled the people fairly, as long as you did not speak out against the royalty in public. But Dracul loved his sons, Radu, Mercia, and Dracula, son of the dragon. Dracul himself plotted against the Sultan Murad, but knew he had too much power to oppose, but gladly let others pass through his territory to attack the Sultan. This insult was too much for the Sultan, who took Dracula and Radu hostage to ensure his loyalty. And he was successful in that regard, as the two princes were raised by the Sultan family. But then they learned that the noblemen under Dracul's reign betrayed him and murdered him and Mercia. The Sultan, once again being a fair man, allowed Dracula to take his rightful place and assume command of the country. Dracula swore vengeance upon the noblemen, finally taking them one Easter and saying their only chance to ensure loyalty was to march for 2 days and rebuild an ancient castle on the Argis River, a fortress against attacks from the south, and name it Castle Dracula. Naturally, not all the noble people were up for the journey. and found themselves in rather uncomfortable positions when they proved themselves unable to complete the quest. But of course, those few that survived the journey and completed the castle were soon killed anyway by Vlad Dracula, or as he was also known, Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler. And yet he kept the Hungarians and Turks from invading, so he was still a hero. A hero who burned down monasteries and invaded countries ruled by rivals to his throne. Soon the Pope called for war against Islamic rulers, and Dracula, loyal to his oath to the Order of the Dragon, was only too happy to make war with the Sultan who had given him his throne. Radu, however, remained loyal to the new Sultan, Mehmed. Mehmed launched attacks on Transylvania and almost took it, if not for Dracula using the strategies of his enemies against them. A forest of 20,000 impaled Turks. It sent Mehmed back in fear, but he left Radu behind with a small force to work on conquering the land with a bit more subtlety. He called upon the people and noblemen that the war with the Turks would end if he were placed on the throne instead of Dracula. And the people, tired of war, embraced such a promise and drove Dracula from his homeland and placed under house arrest by a former ally. In time, Dracula regained his power and once more reclaimed his throne. But enemies were all around him, and he lacked the power he had once held. Sensing the end was near, Dracula let a half-Turk be his servant as he marched toward his final battle, and was betrayed, killed, and beheaded. However, his body and head would be reunited many years later by Radu, who had survived syphilis, found cursed words and magics, and sought to bring his brother back to life through incantations. Right before a monk stabbed him in the back and let his blood flow into Dracula's body, making him into the vampire we know and love.
Dracula's tale is one of blood and war, my children. Whether fact or fiction is irrelevant. All that matters is that we remember him, now and forevermore. Welcome to the Midnight Madness, my children! Being a horror host, there is nothing that tugs at the strings of my not beating heart than seeing the tale of a horror host destroyed by ignorant people, and the dangers of such ill compassion for our breed.
Alastair Green was a local weatherman who, every Halloween, would host a horror movie marathon as his character Alastair Arcane. His popularity grew a little bit, and he was hired by his hometown to come and host a regular show. However, it seems that local parents, religious folks, and sponsors did not like the macabre sense of humor he displayed.
And why the hell did you hire him in the first place? You think I eat the flesh of the living for fun? Well, okay, I do, but you get what you pay for.
The stress caused by lawsuits and bad press by the ignorant people caused his wife to fall ill, his show to be cancelled, and him to become an old recluse. However, the children of these ignorant malcontents soon came to love Alastair as they grew older, and he was all too happy to share with them all the spooky horror paraphernalia he had acquired over the years. But unfortunately, after a year of his heart warming again from the children, he fell ill himself and died, begging the children for forgiveness for what he had done. And what had he done? He placed a curse on the town using the Book of the Dead. Since all the adults of the town made him out to be a monster, with his death, he has transformed all of them into monsters. Unfortunately, that means the poor children are defenseless against the creatures of the town, who now seek to eat their own kids. The children go to Alastair's house and figure all this out, realizing that Alastair was the only one who could stop the curse. And thus they must bring him back from the dead. Using the book, they resurrect him, and while he is unable to recognize them at first, fortunately, one of the children kisses his cheek and gets him to remember who he truly is. He reverses the spell and apologizes once again for his attempt at revenge. But of course, one of the ignorant fools shoots him, calling him a monster and a deviant. However, the dead once brought back are very hard to put back in the ground, and he is allowed to leave. Even the police let him go, saying that if he stays, the stupid asshole who shot him will be tried with attempted murder. Sometimes, my children, there is real justice in this world. And what happened to Alastair Arcane? Well, once a horror host.
Let this be a lesson to all of you, my children. When your parents say that horror makes you do horrible things, ask them what horror movies they watched then. It's the night! It's the night! My children, yes, we've had a story where Batman was a vampire, but how about one where he's Frankenstein?
Behold Dr. Thomas Wayne on his way back to his scientific university. Now behold a highwayman who robs his carriage and murders he and his wife, leaving only the young Bruce Wayne to live. Bruce swears vengeance upon his parents' killer, but Thomas is alive just long enough to tell his son that science, not revenge, should be his goal. And thus he swears to live by that oath, even growing up to attend the same university as his father. However, young Bruce rejects the company of most men. The regular people around him seem to hold no interest for him. However, there is one hunchbacked man, a wretch of sorts, who serves Mr. Wayne. He goes by the name of Alfredo. I will spare you all a joke about Wayne's monster being made out of cheese. But in fact, there is actually one person whom Bruce has a connection. Julia Lavenza, a woman whom Bruce is attempting to romance. Unsuccessfully though, since he keeps sequestering himself in a castle he has recently purchased. Seeking support from his fellows at the university, he brings his colleague Dr. Seltsam to the castle to show him what he has learned. He has discovered that all living beings have a unique electricity to them. This energy of the human body can be harnessed upon death and transferred to other living beings. Like, say, giving the sight energy of a bat to a dog, causing it to transform slightly into having more of a bat-like face, but possessing the keen sight of that bat. Dr. Seltsam believes it to be witchcraft and refuses to help, but soon Bruce discovers an underground storehouse at the university which contains the brain of his father, who had donated his body to medical science upon death. With the knowledge of lightning and electricity that Bruce has discovered, he vows to bring his father back to life in a cadaver made of various body parts, also all perfectly preserved under mysterious circumstances. Unfortunately, the resurrected Thomas Wayne seems unresponsive to his son or other stimuli, save for a weakness to the light. Bruce experiments further and uses the bat energy again, this time for his father, transforming him into a literal Batman. The Batman escapes and begins hunting highwaymen along the roads, as if accessing some deep memory of his death. But the real villain soon becomes clear. Dr. Seltsam, who developed the preservative fluid at the cost of many lives, all in the name of advancing science. Can Bruce and his monstrous Batman stop Dr. Seltsam?
Well, I can't give you all the answers, my children. Castle of the Bat shows that whether it is himself wearing the cowl or him playing with forces beyond his control, Bruce Wayne will always make a monster.
Eerie greetings, my children. I have been neglectful as of late. The first year of the Longbox, we spotlighted Creepy's companion comic about science fiction horror. But we didn't last year. So, why don't we take a peek at something eerie? If I ever stop loving horror anthology, my children, you can have me killed all over again. And while I don't often discuss the covers of comics, just remember that they are often as glorious as what lies inside, like this beastly beauty with horns, scars, and rather extended appendages all over the form. I think that's even another eye and mouth growing out of their chest. Gorgeous. First up from Cousin Eerie is Joy of Life. It pertains to a 40,000-year-old cow skeleton discovered by some college kids that still has a preserved stomach and a bizarre prehistoric fungal spore within it. A scientist named Dr. Gulan is brought out of retirement to study the spore and help it grow into a mushroom-like substance that seems to stimulate the pleasure center of the brain. When some of the liquids of the spore are tested on a monkey, it makes it insanely happy and joyful. However, soon afterward, the work is confiscated and destroyed. Dr. Gulan, having nothing else to live for aside from the work, takes a small sample of the mushroom back with her and consumes it. She then looks into a mirror and sees herself young and beautiful again. However, as it turns out, the chemical mutates whatever takes it, turning them into a monstrous creature that is hallucinating everything, causing widespread destruction and even consuming other living beings. However, the police are able to stop her rampage. And at least she managed to die with a smile on her face. Isn't that how you want to go out, turning into a horrible monster while undergoing terrible delusions? That's how I always dreamed it would be. Next up for all you kaiju fans is the king of all monsters. Aging suit actor Haruo Furuya is being forcibly retired from his role as the giant creature Monstar. They're going to replace the suit with digital motion capture technology and new cameras that are too good for the pyrotechnics of the genre. Haruo, saddened when he is told that Monstar no longer frightens audiences anymore, angrily hits the camera, which malfunctions and electrocutes him. And well, if monster movies have taught us anything from Frankenstein to Friday the 13th Part 6, electricity equals monster! Haruo grows to giant size and takes his young producer around the city as he smashes it to show them a performance they will never forget. But she points out the obvious. Yes, the man inside the costume is more important, and that they do a better job of scaring audiences. But when you teach them to know fear and to believe in monsters, you also teach them how to fight monsters. And finally we have Journey into Wonder, which, like Eerie is the cousin of Creepy, is a fantasy story, the cousin of science fiction. It tells the tale of a dwarf, or a goblin specifically, by the name of Grendel. On a special day, he came to King Xenia for knighthood, to serve his king and be given the title of Sir. The court balked that such a hideous little troll could be given such an honor, but he is given the chance to serve by going to rescue a sorceress guarded by the giant creature known as the Grinka. I am beginning to notice a theme in this comic of large monsters and prejudices against them for just doing their job. Fortunately, Grendel has a strong heart and even stronger spirit, for he ventures forth and is able to slay the two-headed Gringa by collapsing a cave wall on top of him. He rescues the sorceress, who is blind due to a curse, and returns with her to the king, along with a magic ring that Grendel suspects is the true source of his victory. The court once more laughs at the idea that Grendel was successful at his task due to his ugliness and size, and is challenged to a joust, which he wins! Was it the power of the ring that brought him success? Or perhaps the power of his convictions?
Who cares either way? The important thing is to simply remember that we all have our own elegantly eerie tales of the exciting and extraordinary. And they can usually be found in anthologies like this. Buy war bonds today, my children! Why is that? Because today we are going back to World War II and the superhero team led by Captain America. What horrors will they face? Why, Nazi Frankenstein, of course!
The story is a flashback concerning the superhero group known as the Invaders, featuring the glorious team of Captain America, Bucky, Namor, on the original robotic Human Torch.
What's that? You are surprised that I support American superheroes? My children, I may be a master of the macabre, but I am an American! Can't you tell by my American accent?
Cap, Bucky, and Namor head to the Swiss Alps to investigate possible Nazi activity in the otherwise neutral country. The Human Torch and his sidekick Toro had gone in first, but disappeared. Villagers attack, thinking them strange demons until they recognize Captain America. Strange doings have been afoot, and they have been under severe strain. First came the grave robbings. Then there was the sight of the Human Torch and Toro, whom they also believed to be demons. But they were headed for Castle Frankenstein. Then came the monster that slaughtered several villagers before lumbering back to the castle. After Cap convinces the villagers to return home, they make their way to the home of Basil Frankenstein, finding far worse than the monster of legend, Nazis! The monster does not seem to want to fight, but is under the control of the cruel, wheelchair-bound Basil Frankenstein and his assistant with large eyebrows, Kitty. What's worse, the monster is actually stronger than Cap, able to knock him out without much difficulty. Basil even taught him how to speak, but only 2 words, Sig Heil! But it seems the story ties back to another one we've seen before in the Longbox this year. For it was not Basil who created this monster, but the original Victor Frankenstein. And indeed, this is the same creature from Monster of Frankenstein!
Yes, not even Marvel's horror comics can overcome the crossover cavalcades of the capes and costume crowd.
Kitty is actually a Japanese woman named Dr. Kitagawa, a surgeon who plans to transplant the brain of crippled Dr. Frankenstein into Captain America's body. And Basil Frankenstein himself, rejected by the villagers because of his namesake, has found appreciation for his name and talents among the Nazis. He plans to use the knowledge of the monster's creation on the energies of the Human Torch's android body to allow dead soldiers in the Nazi army to be resurrected and continue fighting for the Axis. Namor and the villagers attack, summoned by lights from the castle. They free our heroes and destroy the implant that allowed Basil to control the monster, who in turn kills both himself and the evil doctors. For now, anyway. After all, the Frankenstein monster has a habit of returning from the dead.
Nazis, Frankenstein, and superheroes. If there is anything else that comic books need, I don't want to hear about it. In space, no one can hear you get high, my children. But fortunately, this humorous little tale takes place on Earth. About a horror from the depths of space. Or something.
Angel is a simple cartoonist living with his girlfriend Vanessa and is devoted to making a webcomic. Unfortunately for him, he doesn't know how to code in HTML. As such, he goes out into the streets seeking some help on the matter and comes across a drug dealer whose supplier knows the best HTML coder. And the best part is that he's even willing to help him. All that Angel has to do is deliver a message to a rival gang. You see, both gangs are dealing in a very special drug, Crash. It is so named because the substance crashed onto Earth from space. And what sort of a drug could come from space? Well, when you snort it and get high, you become a betentacled, split-headed monstrosity that eats up people, and you kind of resemble mashed potatoes. He meets back up with Vanessa, who is walking their cat and wondering why he's hanging out in front of a crack house at 3 a.m.
Well, naturally, he's trying to make a webcomic. Why was she walking her cat at 3 a.m.?
Fortunately, Vanessa also carries a gun and is able to make short work of the monstrous crackheads. But their poor cat decides to eat some of the crash and becomes a monster itself, though one more inclined to let its owners ride around on its back. Angel wants to call it quits and worry about it later, but Vanessa insists he go confront the original supplier. After all, he always has this problem of putting things off, like his webcomic. The rest of the dealers, however, have all snorted the stuff and become monsters too, so Vanessa and Angel must hack and slash their way until they reach the supplier, who decides that injecting the stuff would be a good idea, and he becomes a giant monster! And so Angel must do the same if they are to stop his rampage. Also, aliens come down to help fix everything, so they really didn't need to do anything to begin with.
The thing that came from space or something is an hilarious little one-off about monsters and nonchalance in the face of the bizarre. Because sometimes when facing monsters and aliens and drugs, you've just got to laugh. Secret salutations, my children! While we sometimes take a look at the cape and costume crowd, it is always about the heroes. Well, how about this time we look at the villains?
The Secret Six are a group of villainous mercenaries, each with their own baggages and disturbances. There is Scandal, daughter of the immortal Wandel Savage. Deadshot, assassin and crackshot. Ragdoll, contortionist and crazy. Bane, breaker of the bat. Jeanette, beautiful banshee. And finally Catman, who wishes to be a hero. If only he wasn't such a villain. So what makes this story so special as to deserve a spot in the Longbox this season? Oh, my children, we'll be getting to that. The important thing to note, though, is Junior. Junior is a mob boss. The mob boss. And he works out of a box.
He's like a hobo. A hobo who makes you choose whether you die or your family dies, and then just pulls you into the box and murders you anyway.
The Secret Six have been tasked with kidnapping a former superheroine called the Tarantula. It seems she has gotten her hands on something very important, something very powerful. It is so important, in fact, that when the Six are sent to take her, every other mercenary on Earth begins hunting them down. But even the heroes don't want to see the bloodshed caused by this little object, this card. Batman tries to get them to stay away from this job, leading to a little confrontation between the cat and the bat to distract him while the others do the job. And since they did the job, Junior hires all the villains to send a very clear message to stab and cut and maim and dismember and torture them with every depravity known to man for helping Tarantula escape. And, of course, to get back the card. But what is this card? What is so important about it?
Oh, my children, that's easy. It's a get out of hell free card.
Forged by Neron. You remember him, right? Devilish fellow involved in the Die of Judgment comic I spotlighted last year. It is one of a kind, an instant way to make sure you are not damned for all eternity. Think of it, my children, the ability to murder and steal and do every dark sin under the eyes of heaven. But you are secure forever as long as you have that card. It's especially important when you remember that in the DC universe, hell is very much a real place with real demons and real fire and really bad things that you know will happen to you if you go there.
Unless you end up a ghoul like me, where you are not so much punished as much as restricted and... Oh, I've said too much. Point is, at least I'm not in hell. What is the theology around me, anyway?
And so the Secret Six, each of them monsters in their own right, must not only contend with the monster that is Junior, but also the hundreds of villains who want the card, or their heads for the bounty, and of course, each other. For the two most dangerous words in the universe when it comes to an artifact like this, the possibility that it presents them with are... what if? Who gets the card? Who is Junior? Does the card even work?
Well, you'd better go out and buy the book, my children! And then buy every Secret Six book you can find. You won't regret it! I sure didn't! It's 12 o'clock, my children. The witching hour. Yes, we have spent an awful lot of time this season talking about Marvel's classic horror comics. So, how about something from their competition?
Ah yes, DC Anthology Horror. They had their stuff like the House of Secrets, the House of Mystery, Unexpected. But here we have for your delectation something just for those still awake at midnight. We have 3 horror hosts for us. The witches Mordred, Mildred, and Cynthia, each with a story for us. And they invite the readers to decide which of their terrifying tales is the best.
Ooh, there's something I should have all my children do. Tell me which episode of my glorious little series is the best I've done, and then have you argue and fight over it. I'll even supply the knives.
First up is Yarg.
That's Italian for AG.
A man named Bernard is rather upset that his former friend Mike has managed to get a promotion at work in only 2 years of working there, but he has been slaving away for 12 in the same position. He forces Mike off a cliff where he makes the title scream, and soon the scream haunts him as he tries to sleep. Even walking down the stairs causes them not to creak, but yell obscenely at him in the death cry. Mike's own ghost appears, telling him he will get revenge for his death by making Bernard fall forever! But we soon learn that perhaps it was Bernard's own guilt that made him scream, and now he really is screaming forever in his nightmares. Next up we find the Trip of Fools. During the time of the slave trade, a group of black men are sold by a tribal leader to a ship captain who unloads the men at a port. The auctioneer takes them off the captain's hands, but the man disappears before he can take his money. There is one particular man who, in addition to his shackles, has a strange silver bracelet. And soon the auctioneer disappears after he is sold. It seems to happen at every midnight, the witching hour again. And this happens once more when the owners vanish. And we soon learn why. For this man is no man at all, but an alien kidnapping samples of humanity. The kidnapped will be perfect nursemaids for the civilization's children, teaching them in the ways of cruelty so that they can conquer other alien empires. After a brief story about a ghostly constable, there is our final tale. Once upon a surprise ending.
Spoilers! Turns out it was man who was the real monster.
A fashion model with a questionable spine tries her best to become the best model in the world. And soon she spots a handsome, princely fellow. In fact, this is a modern-day fairy tale, for this handsome man would be even more beautiful if not for a wicked troll who cast a spell on him unless he steals a golden record from an evil giant named Corporation. The model swears to do the deed for him, getting past the giant and stealing the record for the man. And when he touches the record, he becomes his true self. A frog! Which tale tantalized your terror twitches?
I'll leave that to you, my children. In the meantime, I will see you again when the witching hour strikes. Double, double, toil and trouble, my children. Fire burn and cauldron bubble. By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes.
The comic is an adaptation of the story with the same name by Ray Bradbury. It's even authorized by him with an introduction and everything. If you don't know the story, here's how it goes. Will Holloway and Jim Nightshade are two 13-year-olds living in Greentown, Illinois. It is a week before Halloween, their birthday as well, 1 minute before midnight and 1 minute after. A strange man comes by and gives them a lightning rod, for a storm is coming. Jim is adventurous and without fear, while Will is cautious and thoughtful. Together, the two do experience a storm, just not the one they were expecting. Cougar and Dark Circus comes to town. Strange for so light in the season. And the things they see within the circus are all the more mysterious. There is the out-of-order carousel that runs backwards. And runs your age backwards as well. They spot Mr. Cougar, a rude, angry man, use it to reverse his age to childhood, and go off to spend some time with a teacher of theirs as her supposed nephew. Jim wants to use the carousel to become older, but when they chase Mr. Cougar there again, it goes wild and the control box explodes, making him age far more than he expected. The kids summon the police for help, but all seems fine at the circus. They're presenting their new act, Mr. Electrico, the old man who comes alive from the electric chair. But they also spot the old man who gave them the lightning rod. Just a bit shrunk anyway. And so they decide that they must find out what the circus is doing, before the circus finds them at least. But even if the circus wasn't looking, they'd do it, hard as it may be.
Being good is a fearful occupation, my children. Sometimes it is worth it, though.
The clever boys are tested by the circus. They send their bloodhound out, the blind witch who can smell their fears and thoughts. She tries to mark their roof, but they wash away the mark and trick the witch to an abandoned home and pierce the balloon with an arrow to send her away. After some more encounters, they finally bring Will's father, the town librarian, into the mix. He believes them when he encounters Mr. Dark, the illustrated man, looking for the boys.
They look for the history of the circus and how it came to town once before. Over 100 years before, with the same proprietors. Men who live forever, who need to use pain and hurt to feed the circus and feed their immortality. And their hellish strength, for the illustrated man comes by the library to find the boys. Mr. Holloway knows now, and he believes, and he is scared.
And the illustrated man tells him something else. Be more scared.
The illustrated man is strong and has strong servants, like the aforementioned blind witch who uses her magic to silence the boys and lead them along like zombies. She is left with Mr. Holloway to end his heart. But her magics tickle him and keep his blood pumping, and his laughter frightens her off. He comes by and helps the boys with a bullet trick that the carnival folk would use, where it would appear she caught the bullet with her teeth. Fortunately, it is her brain that catches it instead, breaking her spell on the boys. But the action is not over. The circus stands. The evil illustrated man must be stopped. How do they do so?
Well, I can't give away all the answers, my children. All I will say is that sometimes good has weapons and evil has none. And sometimes wicked things cannot stand tears and joy and laughter. They're creeping up on you, my children! Do you like the movies, but need something for a lonesome death? Perhaps something to celebrate Father's Day with? Well, open up a crate and have something to tide you over. Creepshow!
Creepshow is a horror anthology film directed by George Romero, written by Stephen King, and featured special effects by Tom Savini. It was inspired by our much-beloved EC horror comics. And when something is inspired by comics, you should not be surprised that it finds itself adapted into comic form. The adaptation does not contain the framing device that the movie had of a child with an angry father who demands he stop reading his horror comics and subsequently meets a painful end thanks to a voodoo doll. But it does have the other wonderful tales of spooks and nightmares. And what better way to show off its influences than by having its own comic book horror host, The Creep, our guide on this journey into fear. The first story is Father's Day, about a terrible little family that hates one another. But one member in particular, Bedelia, was hateful towards her father, who had her boyfriend murdered because he didn't approve of him. And in revenge, she allegedly whacked him over the head with an ashtray and killed him. And now she visits his grave every Father's Day in memory of him. But on this Father's Day, he decides to get up and visit her! Then there is the lonesome death of Jordy Werrell. A meteor crashes at his farm and he touches it, burning his fingers in the process. When he tries to cool it off with water, it splits open and reveals a green liquid that he touches. And soon, grass begins to grow from that spot, and on his tongue when he tried to cool off his burnt finger. And then his face. And, well, anything he touches. He has quite the green thumb. And green everything by the end of it.
Oh, and I should note, for those of you who enjoy your horror a little more blue, most of the swearing is censored. But really, what's so scary about naughty words anyway?
Next we have the story of The Crate. A janitor at a college finds a box labeled Arctic Expedition 1834 and asks Professor Stanley to come take a look at it, pulling him away from a party. At this party, his friend Henry is there with his wife.
his shrewish lush of a wife that Henry cannot stand. When the janitor and Professor Stanley fish out the crate, it seems there's something alive in there. Something very hungry and with sharp teeth. Something that might be able to help with Henry's wife. Fourth up on offering is something to tide you over. Richard is a wealthy, cruel man who has discovered that his wife is having an affair, and thus he's decided on a bit of a cruel punishment for them. Burying them neck deep in sand on the beach, right when the tide is starting to come in. Oh, but Richard, be careful. Sometimes what gets drowned at sea has a habit of washing back up. And finally, for our creep show, we have They're Creeping Up on You. Not that there's anything really that spectacularly horrific in this one, my children. Just remember that the cockroaches will outlive us all. No matter how well the coffins are sealed, no matter how good your bug spray or how clean you keep things, the cockroaches will creep up on us all. Creepshow, whether it's the movie or the comic, is the most fun you'll ever have being scared. My children, yesterday we looked at an adaptation of a movie that found its basis in horror comics. So, how about today we find a comic adapted from a movie based a little on real life? Ah, Psycho! The story of Norman Bates and his dearest mother. The story of murder and insanity and blood flowing down a drain as it drips off the end of a kitchen knife. Don't you just love family comedies, my children? In case you are unfamiliar with the film, and shame on you if you are, it begins with a woman named Marion who decides on the spur of the moment to change her life by stealing $40,000 and running away across the state to get married. Along the way, as her paranoia and guilt gets the better of her, she stops at a little forgotten motel along the highway to decide what to do, and meets the owner, Norman Bates. Norman has quite a talent for taxidermy. He could have other very useful skills as well. Except that he spends all his time under the thumb of his dear mother, who seems to be watching from the house up the path. Mrs. Bates is a very angry, jealous woman who doesn't like the pretty girls who might distract Norman and dirty him up. So after Norman peeps in on Marion about to take a shower, well, Mrs. Bates decides to take matters into her own hands. And knife! But one does not steal $40,000 without attracting some attention from people. So many people begin coming to the Bates Motel in search of Marion and the missing money. There's the private detective who wants to talk to Mrs. Bates when Norman is fidgety and nervous and can't give a straight answer to his inquiries about the woman. Well, I hope that detective has a nice trip. We'll see him next fall! Oh, but then there's Marion's sister and Marion's lover, both especially interested in knowing what happened to her, and of some new questions that are raised about Norman and his mother. This is an adaptation that, despite being in color, feels very much like it's still in black and white, with its very subdued color palette, and some hinting of death that the good Mr. Hitchcock included. And one or two that he did not. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho is a worthy adaptation of the story, drawn beautifully in every psychotic detail. Happy Halloween, my children! While there are no more Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash comics, we will still end the season on another tale of forces battling one another. Zombies versus robots! In this corner, zombies, the walking dead, mindless corpses out to devour all of humankind, whether it's their flesh or their brines. Strength in numbers! In the other corner, robots, automatons created to serve man. Skin of steel with machine brains and circuit hearts. They go beep boop. Let's get ready to rumble! A group of scientists have created a gateway into the future. The first scientist who goes through, though, does not return in one piece and has to be vacuumed up by the robots that also exist in this facility. The next scientist, feeling like he needs to be better equipped than just a hazmat suit, puts on his Iron Man costume and steps through into the future. And what does the future hold? A zombie plague, of course! And some idiot designed the robot suit to have glass eye holes so the zombies are able to get through them. Oh, but while the future doesn't look all that great, the present isn't doing much better. For as it turns out, the scientist left behind has been tinkering with robots. They have been made to serve mankind, to fight wars in their stead. But the scientist built them too well, and they kill the scientist. But things do not improve for robot kind. The zombie plague from the future comes back in time through the gateway, and humanity is quickly destroyed, save for one remaining human infant. The robots need to clone the baby to restore the human race, but the zombies are still running amok. What's worse, they seem to possess some kind of psychic group mind, able to sense a new food source when one of them finds it. And unfortunately, the baby Lucy is the last food for them on the entire planet. Only one baby to feed millions and billions of zombies? Where is Zombie Jesus around so that everyone gets a fair piece? The situation is made worse when somehow zombie blood gets into some robot systems, manifesting as a worm virus and making zombie robots. And perhaps worse than that, a single drop of zombie blood finds its way into baby Lucy's mouth, infecting her. The warbot decides that the only way to save the Earth after everything that has happened is, well, a total reboot, nuking the entire planet. But the story does not end there, my children. Aside from its direct sequel, Zombies vs. Robots vs. Amazons, and other zombies vs. robot stories, the zombie plague that could infect both man and machine found its way into the pages of Infestation, which I showed you last year. And perhaps we'll see even more of that next year. For now, though, the time comes again for the Longbox to close. Be good to one another, my children. Play trick or treat, play a horror movie, play some Longbox videos. But above all else, remember to have fun. Because in the end, that is what Halloween is all about.